Elise traveled to South Korea in search of beauty, peace, and adventure, but what she found was something no travel guide could prepare her for. Hidden behind the cracked windows of an abandoned seaside villa, her phone caught something watching, frozen, pale, and wrong. At first, she thought it was just a reflection, until it moved. What do you do when the only witness to the truth is your phone, and no one believes you? What if the danger wasn't in the house, but in the window? Elise had spent the last year backpacking through Asia, chronicling her travels in short-form vlogs that had gained a loyal, growing audience. Her journey had always been about discovery, places untouched by influencers, hidden gems off the beaten path. That's what led her to Haenim, a small, fog-wrapped town on the southern tip of South Korea's coastline. The train ride-in was eerie. Deserted platforms, overgrown tracks, and passengers who refused to meet her eye when she asked about the place. She should have listened to the silence, but her curiosity drowned out the warnings. Online, she had found a strange listing on a forgotten forum: abandoned seaside villa in Haenim, untouched, unclaimed, unfiltered beauty. The post had no comments, no upvotes, no engagement, just a GPS pin and one blurry photo of a crumbling house near the cliffs. Elise, always seeking the unexplored, thought it was perfect. She arrived under overcast skies, the air dense with salt and static, and her taxi driver refused to take her all the way. "You walk," he said bluntly, pointing down the overgrown road and handing her a flashlight unprompted. The path to the villa was flanked by gnarled trees and whispering wind, the kind that seemed to speak words if you listened long enough. When she reached the house, it was worse than the photo, and better. A rotting wooden frame, windows half-shattered, yet it stood tall, proud, and entirely alone. Elise's breath caught. She loved it. The interior smelled of mildew and sea spray, yet it held traces of elegance: ornate moldings, faded wallpaper, and a cracked chandelier dangling like a skeleton. She unpacked her gear, set up her cameras, and started filming. "This is the most haunted-looking place I've ever stayed in," she laughed on camera. But when she played it back, her voice echoed oddly, as if something had spoken right after her, something not caught live, only in playback. That night, she dreamed of water filling the rooms, seeping through walls, and a pale girl standing in the corner with no eyes, just black pools. She woke up gasping, the sheets tangled, the air freezing. Her camera was still recording, but the battery had drained. She chalked it up to travel fatigue and brushed her teeth at the cracked mirror, not noticing the condensation spelling out faint letters: "Don't stay." The next morning, she explored the villa's surroundings: the cliffs, the rotting gazebo out back, and a small stone statue overgrown with vines. Something about the statue unsettled her. It was of a child, but the face had been scratched out violently. She documented it anyway, smiling for the camera and pretending nothing was wrong. But inside, a slow dread began curling in her stomach like smoke. The locals she met later that day at the town market were kind, but distant. When she mentioned the villa, their eyes shifted. One old man spat on the ground and walked away. A woman grabbed her arm and whispered, "Some things should stay abandoned." Elise laughed it off, playing into the horror trope for her channel. But deep down, she knew this was different. She had stayed in haunted temples, slept beside ancient burial grounds, but nothing had ever felt like this. This wasn't a place that wanted to be remembered. That night, as she edited her footage, she noticed something strange. In the background of her walkthrough, by the window, a faint silhouette stood just outside, perfectly still. But when she paused and zoomed in, the figure seemed to blur, as if the camera lens couldn't decide what it was looking at. Elise rubbed her eyes, chalked it up to artifacting, and kept editing. Yet even as she fell asleep, her laptop screen glowed faintly, frozen on that window frame, on that barely there shape watching her. Elise spent her second day in Haenim filming B-roll and narrating over clips for her upcoming travel vlog. She moved between decaying rooms, describing the peeling wallpaper and rusted fixtures with a mix of sarcasm and fascination, determined to turn her eerie accommodation into compelling content. The villa, though haunting in design, seemed still too still. No birdsong, no insects, no ambient noise beyond the occasional creak of timber expanding in the moist air. It was the kind of silence that rang in the ears, as if something were holding its breath. That evening, she cooked a simple meal on her portable stove and set her phone to record a time-lapse through the villa's large living room window, capturing the sun's descent into a thick blanket of ocean fog. She felt uneasy, her skin prickling whenever she turned her back to a doorway, but she chalked it up to nerves and the house's oppressive atmosphere. After dark, while editing in bed, she noticed something strange in the footage from the time-lapse. Around the midpoint, as the light dimmed and shadows grew, the reflection on the window showed something that shouldn't have been there. A figure, faint, humanoid, unmoving, not outside, but in the reflection, as if it were behind her, watching. She froze, paused the footage, played it again. The figure was slender, head tilted, and oddly tall. Her camera hadn't picked up anyone actually in the room, and she knew with certainty that she had been alone. Shaking off the chill, she checked the raw footage and her surroundings. There was no one in the house, nothing outside. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had missed something important. That night, her sleep was plagued by vivid dreams again. In one, she stood by the same window, only this time, her reflection moved on its own, slowly raising a hand to its mouth, as if trying to speak a word she couldn't hear. She woke up at 3:17 a.m., breath shallow, drenched in sweat, and found her phone across the room on the floor, recording. It had captured 3 hours of static footage from a strange angle, facing the doorway to her bedroom. On playback, there was a moment, just a flicker, where a face appeared in the doorway. Pale, blank, impossibly still. The features seemed blurred or out of focus, but unmistakably human. Elise rewound the clip over and over, heart racing faster each time. The face was only there for less than half a second, as if whoever or whatever had passed by didn't want to be seen, only known. Panic clawed at her ribs, but she didn't want to leave. Not yet. She needed to prove to herself it was all explainable, all just tricks of light or stress-induced illusions. She'd dealt with weird situations before, temples rumored to be cursed, caves with bones, but nothing like this. She began to talk to the camera differently, more guarded, as if trying to convince not just her viewers, but herself. "I think someone's playing a prank on me," she said in her next recording, though her eyes betrayed doubt. Later that morning, she uploaded a snippet of the strange reflection to her backup drive and sent it to her friend, Juno, in Busan. She included the message, "Tell me I'm not losing it." Juno replied only with, "That's not you in the reflection." Elise stared at the screen for a long time, her hands trembling. That afternoon, while filming in the garden behind the villa, her phone randomly glitched. The screen went black, then flickered on with the image of the living room, as if it were streaming live from inside the house, though she was outside and no apps were running. She rushed back inside, half expecting to find someone had broken in. The doors were locked. The air was colder. Something in the house had changed. She could feel it. The light no longer reached certain corners. Her voice echoed differently when she spoke. Her reflection in the window now lagged behind her movements, just slightly. That night, she kept every device recording. Her GoPro, her phone, even her webcam. Around midnight, while reviewing the earlier footage, she noticed a pattern. Every time she walked past a mirror or reflective surface, a second figure could be seen. Blurry, pale, always at a distance, and closer each time. The last clip of the night captured something no horror movie could prepare her for. Elise walked into the kitchen, chatting casually with her viewers. But in the reflection on the microwave surface, the figure stood directly behind her, head turned sideways as if listening. She hadn't noticed it at the time, but now she watched it move, not walk, shift, like a thought sliding across consciousness. And then the recording cut to black mid-frame. Her phone vibrated with a notification. New recording saved. But she hadn't started anything. She opened the file. The footage showed her asleep in bed, filmed from the inside of her closet. The door cracked just enough to reveal a single eye watching from the dark. Elise left the villa that morning with her backpack slung tightly over her shoulders, phone tucked in her pocket but its camera lens smudged with a thumbprint she didn't remember making. She walked briskly toward the town center, trying to convince herself she needed food, fresh air, and maybe stronger Wi-Fi. But beneath those excuses was a gnawing desperation for normalcy. To hear someone else's voice, to see a place that didn't feel watched. The market bustled with life in a quiet, cautious way. Vendors offered fresh produce, dried fish, hand-woven goods, but their smiles faltered the moment she made eye contact. Elise asked a stall owner if she knew anyone who had lived near the villa. The woman's eyes narrowed instantly, and she turned away without speaking. A fruit vendor shook his head and muttered a word Elise didn't understand, but the way he glanced over his shoulder before saying it made her skin prickle. She wandered the streets, hoping to find someone less fearful. Finally, outside a modest corner store, she met someone who didn't immediately look away. An older woman sweeping the front step, her back hunched but her gaze sharp. Elise approached cautiously and tried again. "Do you know anything about the villa near the cliffs?" she asked. The woman's eyes did not waver, but her sweeping slowed. "You shouldn't stay there," she said in Korean-accented English, the words low and gravelly. "Bad things happen to people who stay too long." Elise pressed gently, promising she wasn't looking for trouble, just context. Maybe even history for her video. The woman hesitated, then beckoned her inside the shop, past dusty shelves and faded photographs. She pulled out an old wooden box from behind the counter and unfolded a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Missing girl case still unsolved. Local authorities abandon search." Below was a photo of a teenager, pale-skinned and smiling wide, framed by the villa's familiar windows. Elise's breath caught. The woman said the girl's name was So-Yun. 10 years ago, she'd vanished during a summer trip with her family. The family had owned the villa. After her disappearance, they left the country, never to return. The house was sealed, but over the years, curious travelers had found their way inside. Some stayed a night and left shaken. Others didn't leave at all. Elise asked why no one demolished the place. The woman shrugged with a bitter twist of her lips. "The land rejects it. Every time someone tries, something stops them. Fires, accidents, people getting hurt." Elise's fingers tightened around the clipping. The image of So-Yun lingered in her mind, the background of the photo disturbingly familiar. She was standing in what was now Elise's bedroom. That night, Elise combed through her own footage again, zooming into reflections, backgrounds, corners she had previously ignored. In one still frame, just for a moment, behind a broken mirror, a face that looked eerily similar to So-Yun stared back at her, expressionless, unblinking, as if waiting to be noticed. Her heart pounded in her chest as she whispered the name out loud, almost as a test. The lights flickered immediately. A glass fell from the counter without warning. Her phone began vibrating uncontrollably before switching itself off. Elise didn't sleep that night. She sat on the floor, surrounded by her devices, rereading the article and scribbling notes like a woman trying to solve a puzzle that didn't want to be solved. In the article's fine print, there was a mention of previous disappearances going back decades. All women, all last seen near the villa. It had once been a sanitarium, then a boarding house, then left to rot. Her research grew obsessive. She found more clippings, old forum posts buried on the dark corners of the web, all hinting at something ancient and malevolent tied to the house. An architecture student once stayed there for a photography project. His final message on a forum read, "She's not dead. She's still in the house." Elise's stomach twisted. She remembered her dream. The water filling the villa, the eyeless girl. It hadn't been a dream. It was memory, echo, warning. The reflection in the window wasn't just showing her something. It was showing her someone. That day, she returned to the old woman to ask more questions. But the store was closed, boarded up, as if it had never been open. When she asked others in town, they told her no such woman existed. No one had run that shop in years. Elise felt the weight of something pressing against her mind, bending her sense of reality. She began to doubt her own memory. Was the shop real? Was the photo? But the clipping was still in her backpack, the creases pressed deep. Back at the villa, she tried to record a final video update, summarizing what she'd discovered. But her camera kept glitching, cutting out her voice. Her phone refused to save the footage. She looked up from her screen and caught sight of her reflection in the window again. But this time, her reflected self wasn't matching her movements. It was smiling. Elise had always prided herself on being rational. Someone who sought the truth behind myths, who laughed off urban legends while dissecting them for her audience. But now, logic had become a thread unraveling beneath her fingers. The villa wasn't just unsettling. It was reacting to her. Every attempt she made to document her findings seemed to be undone by an unseen hand. Every recording disrupted. Every battery drained faster than expected. Every file corrupted with static or replaced by long stretches of black. She decided she needed to confront it directly, to capture whatever was happening with irrefutable clarity. So, she turned her bedroom into a surveillance hub, mounting her GoPros at every angle, placing motion-triggered sensors at each doorway, and using an old baby monitor app to transmit sound to her laptop. She told herself she wasn't afraid, just determined. But her shaking hands betrayed her. As dusk fell, the wind picked up violently, slamming branches against the windows like warning knocks. Elise lit a single candle, half for ambience, half because she didn't trust the lights anymore. She pressed record on every device. Midnight passed with an oppressive silence. Then, at 2:12 a.m., the power went out entirely. The air turned bitterly cold, and her laptop flickered once, then died. Panic began as a low throb in her chest. She reached for her flashlight, only for it to dim, flicker, and go out. She was plunged into absolute darkness, the kind that felt physical, almost liquid, swallowing sound and sense. Then the baby monitor crackled. A whisper, not words, breathing, and footsteps, not hers. Elise froze, unable to tell where the sound was coming from, until the motion sensors began pinging. One in the hallway, then one downstairs, then one just outside her bedroom door. She backed against the far wall, clutching her phone, which vibrated once in her hand, displaying a single message. "Behind you!" She turned, nothing, but her bedroom door creaked open slowly, revealing not a person, but pitch blackness so complete it felt like another dimension. And from within it, something stepped forward. Not walking, gliding, just outside the glow of the candle. She couldn't make out a face, just the silhouette, tall, impossibly thin, and slightly swaying, as if underwater. She scrambled to grab her camera and snapped a photo. The flash blinded her for a second, and when her vision cleared, the figure was gone. Or so she thought. Her phone vibrated again. New notification. Live photo saved. She played it back. The photo moved. The figure in the corner didn't vanish. It turned its head toward her in real time. That was when Elise lost control. She screamed, tore open the closet, and locked herself inside, shaking, heart pounding like a war drum. She could hear footsteps circling the room, slow, deliberate. She held her phone tightly, not daring to breathe. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then a knock from inside the closet. She stumbled out, sobbing, dropping her phone. It hit the ground and began recording again on its own, this time capturing something horrifying. In the mirror across the room, not Elise's reflection, but the girl from the news clipping, So-Yun, mouth hanging open, eyes dark voids, slowly raising her hand to her lips in a silent shush. The footage cut off as the camera fell face down. Elise bolted down the stairs, only to find the front door sealed shut. Not locked, sealed. No handle, no seams. As if it had become part of the wall. Every window was the same. No exit. No way out. Trapped. The air began to feel heavier, harder to breathe, like the villa itself was compressing, pressing in on her lungs. She screamed until her throat burned, pounded on the walls until her knuckles bled. Her cries went unanswered. The house had become a maze. Rooms looping in impossible configurations, doors leading to hallways that didn't exist the day before. Time warped. Her phone showed it was 4:44 a.m., then 9:09 p.m., then blank. Elise began to hallucinate or maybe just unravel. She saw herself in the mirror, but it wasn't her. It was her body, her clothes, but not her face. The voice coming from her throat wasn't hers either. She recorded everything, needing someone, anyone, to know what was happening. But each video vanished after being saved, replaced by one of So-Yun whispering into the lens. She lives here now. Elise curled up in the hallway, camera pressed to her chest, whispering prayers in English and broken Korean. At some point, she passed out. When she awoke, the house was silent. The lights were back. The door was open. It was morning. She ran outside into the sunlight, falling to her knees, gasping for clean air like a drowning victim breaking surface. But her phone was still recording, the screen showing a live feed of her bedroom, and someone still standing at the window watching her leave. After fleeing into the morning light, Elise didn't go far. Her legs shook too violently, her breaths came too shallow, and her sense of direction was completely shattered. She collapsed behind a hedge not far from the villa, clutching her phone like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. Her first instinct was to call for help, but no number would dial. No signal, no GPS, not even an emergency line. Her phone, despite displaying a full charge, acted like it was in another time zone or another world. Hours passed before she finally stumbled into town again, wild-eyed and trembling. A passing man stopped when he saw her state, and Elise managed to stammer out the name of her friend Juno, who had contacts at a local university. Within hours, Juno arrived with two others, one a professor of folklore and the other a documentary filmmaker who specialized in urban legends. Elise, hoarse and exhausted, begged them to go with her to the villa, to see it for themselves, to confirm she wasn't losing her mind. They reluctantly agreed, driven by a mix of concern, curiosity, and skepticism. Together, they returned that afternoon, the villa now bathed in daylight and looking deceptively benign, like an old relic rather than a predator. Elise hesitated at the door, her body reacting with instinctive dread. But the others entered boldly, armed with cameras and equipment. The moment they stepped inside, the air grew heavy again. Not as severe as before, but wrong, like a pressure building behind the walls. The folklore professor walked slowly, noting architectural anomalies and mumbling about traditional Korean ghost stories. Tales of spirits who become trapped not by vengeance, but by memory. The filmmaker, meanwhile, reviewed Elise's remaining footage, including the eerie reflection clips and the closet recording. He paled as he scrubbed through the video, stopping on the frame where So-Yun's face emerged in the mirror. This is not fake, he said under his breath. The group moved room to room, documenting signs of disturbance. Scrawled writing in Old Korean behind wallpaper, childlike etchings scratched into doorframes, and cold spots that moved like living things. Then, in one of the upstairs bedrooms Elise hadn't dared enter before, they found it. A warped section of the wall that sounded hollow when tapped. The filmmaker started recording. The professor gently ran his fingers over the plaster, then abruptly stopped. "It's newer than the rest," he murmured. Like someone sealed something in. With Elise's hands still trembling, they began carefully chipping away at the wall. Dust and old paint filled the air. Beneath the surface, they uncovered something horrifying. A bricked-up alcove, barely the size of a child. Inside, tattered clothing, aged hair ribbons, broken toys, and a cracked porcelain doll sat amid a pile of dry, brittle bones. None of them spoke. The silence in that moment was deeper than fear. It was grief. It was reverence. A tragedy preserved behind plaster. But even more chilling was what the professor noticed next. Old handprints, small, childlike, smeared against the interior wall in faded, dried blood. Dozens of them, all facing inward, as if whatever was inside had tried to claw its way out. Elise fell to her knees, overwhelmed with horror and sorrow. She recognized the ribbons. They matched the ones So-Yun wore in the newspaper photo. This was where she had died. Or worse, this was where she had been buried alive. The professor gently picked up a fragment of the doll and whispered a prayer. The filmmaker filmed it all, saying nothing, his hands visibly shaking. Elise's phone, which she had left on the hallway floor still recording, buzzed and vibrated violently as they unearthed the remains. When she picked it up, the screen was black, but audio played. Faint crying, a girl's voice pleading, not in terror, but in confusion. "Why won't you hear me?" it whispered. "Why won't you let me go?" Juno covered her mouth, backing away. Then the lights flickered again. Not just in the villa, in their equipment, their phones, everything. A dark shape passed by the doorway in the blink of an eye. The group froze, and the professor spoke calmly but firmly. "We've opened something." Elise felt it too. The house had changed. The weight was heavier, the shadows sharper. But there was no malevolence now, not like before. More like something old and broken had finally been seen, had finally been named. They left the villa with the evidence in tow, contacting authorities who later sealed the house entirely and opened a historical investigation into the case. DNA later confirmed the remains belonged to So-Yun. Her parents, unreachable for years, were finally located and brought the news. They didn't speak to the press. But what shocked the world more than the discovery was the last piece of footage Elise posted. A compilation of reflections from the house. Every single one showing So-Yun's face. Not haunting, not screaming, but watching, waiting. And in the final frame, just before the video ends, she smiles. Not at the camera, but at Elise. Elise returned home weeks later, physically intact but mentally fractured. Her sense of self unraveled in places she couldn't begin to repair. The airport was sterile and bright, a jarring contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of the villa. Yet even surrounded by the hum of security lines and gate announcements, she felt watched. Juno had insisted she stay in Busan longer to recover, but Elise wanted distance, a complete severance from the place that had nearly broken her. Back in her apartment in Toronto, the familiarity of her space. The cozy reading nook, the scent of vanilla from an old diffuser, the shelves lined with books and gear, should have grounded her. Instead, everything felt alien. Her first night back, she didn't sleep. Her dreams were a looping echo of the villa. The static, the flickering lights, the whispers. But what terrified her more was her footage. She hadn't looked at it again since the last video upload. Yet as she opened her laptop to delete everything, she found a new folder on her desktop, still watching. Inside were files she hadn't created, video clips recorded after her return. Her heart thundered as she clicked the first one. It was her, asleep in her bed, filmed from across the room. She checked her devices. None were active. None had been recording. Another clip showed her brushing her teeth in the bathroom mirror. Behind her, a reflection. Pale, feminine, head tilted just slightly, eyes dark and searching, barely visible in the glass. Elise screamed, slamming the laptop shut. That night, every mirror in her apartment was covered. She left her phone in the kitchen and slept with the lights on. But the next morning, her phone showed a notification, new memory created. She hadn't taken any pictures. The memory album was titled, With You. Inside, photo after photo of her sleeping, walking, staring out windows, always with something in the frame behind her, blurred, distant, patient. Friends noticed the change. Elise grew paranoid, jumpy. Her once vibrant YouTube channel went silent. Emails and sponsor requests piled up, unanswered. Juno reached out, begging her to talk, but Elise didn't trust her own voice anymore. Then came the breaking point. During a video call with a close friend, the friend abruptly asked, "Who's that behind you?" Elise turned. No one. But in the freeze frame of the call's paused video feed, there it was again, the figure. Taller now, closer, wearing the same tattered dress So-Yun wore in the final mirror reflection. Elise shut down all her accounts, removed all electronics from her bedroom, even visited a therapist who delicately suggested trauma-induced hallucinations. But the evidence wasn't just in her head. One day, while passing a convenience store window, Elise saw her reflection, and for a fraction of a second, it didn't move. It stared directly at her while her body kept walking. She ran home in tears, cameras off, curtains drawn. Still, the presence grew. She felt it behind her when she cooked, heard footsteps while she showered, saw her cat hiss at corners where no one stood. At night, the scratching began. Light at first, then deliberate. Always from the window. Always at 3:17 a.m., the same time her footage had first caught So-Yun in Haenim. Desperate, Elise uploaded one final video, raw and unedited, her face pale and gaunt. In it, she begged viewers to believe her, to understand that what happened in that villa didn't end there. It brought her peace, Elise whispered, eyes wide. But it brought me something else. As she spoke, viewers would later swear they saw movement behind her. Not the obvious kind, not a jump scare, but the slow, dreadful materialization of a figure in the background, watching. A week later, the video disappeared from her channel. Her apartment was found empty, doors locked from the inside. No signs of struggle. No forwarding address. The only thing left behind was her phone, placed perfectly in the center of her bed, screen glowing faintly. Authorities found a video open in the gallery. It played a static-filled clip of her sleeping, the camera slowly zooming in on her face. In the final seconds, the camera panned slightly, revealing the bedroom mirror across from the bed. In it, Elise sat bolt upright, staring directly at the camera. But her real body on the bed never moved. Friends and family posted pleas online, but no leads emerged. Then, days later, one of her older followers uploaded a screenshot from an old livestream she had once done. And in the background of that old video, long before Haenim, was a faint, pale face in her window. It had always been there, watching, waiting, and it hadn't come from the villa. Elise had brought it there.